Today I'm going to be showing you how to make these delicious Puerto Rican Mallorcas. Mallorcas are a sweet, fluffy, and soft bread that are always covered in powdered sugar. Now let me show you the ingredients that you're going to need. First, we'll need 2 cups of all-purpose flour, half a teaspoon of salt, 2 1/4 of a teaspoon of instant yeast, 1/4 cup of sugar, 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, 3 1/2 tablespoons of shortening, 6 ounces of water, about 3 tablespoons of powdered sugar, and 1/4 of a teaspoon of a liquid yellow food coloring. But you can also use the food coloring that comes in the gel form. Now the first thing I like to do is to combine all the liquid ingredients. To the 6 ounces of water, I like to add the vanilla extract and the 1/4 of a teaspoon of food coloring. The reason I do this is so I could distribute the food coloring better. This is because if I add the food coloring directly to the flour or to the dough, it is always harder to distribute the color evenly. You for sure will have to mix the dough more to get an even color. So I mix all the liquids together and save myself the headache. Next, I mix my dry ingredients. To the flour, I add the yeast, salt, and sugar. In this recipe, I used instant yeast, which comes in a small container, but it also comes in packets. But you can also use the dry active yeast. You just have to activate it before using it. I then mix all my dry ingredients a little bit just to distribute everything evenly. Next, what I do is I pour all the flour onto my counter because I like to work on the counter from the start. But you could do this first mix in a bowl if you like. And as you can see, there's no need to sift the flour. Now what I do is that I use the bottom of the bowl that I used for the flour to make a well in the middle of the flour. What we want is to make room to pour the liquid into the middle. Then we add about half of the liquid and start stirring. At first, I like to use a fork because I don't want the flour to stick to my hands yet. I don't add all the liquid at once so it doesn't overflow and spill. Then what I do is little by little, I mix the liquid with the flour. I bring the flour from the edges to the center, and I continue doing this little by little until all the liquid I added has been incorporated. And then when we're done with the liquid, we add a little more and gently continue mixing the flour and the water. And here you can see that a little bit of water always spills out, but that's okay. With the same fork, we gather it towards the center. And see, this is where using a bowl is convenient because it keeps all the water and flour together. And then you don't have to add the water little by little. Using the bowl, you can add it all at once. By this stage, I start using my hands to mix everything together. You'll notice that the dough is super soft. Just continue mixing when almost all the flour has been incorporated, or when you notice that the dough isn't as white, add the rest of the water. This is where the dough will start to stick to your hands a lot. Then I like to use a dough scraper. I use it to scrape off the flour that is sticking to my hands and also to scrape the counter to gather all the flour towards the middle. Then you'll repeat the process of mixing and gathering the dough with this until everything has been incorporated. When you're done, you'll see that the dough is still sticky, and that is perfectly normal because this is a very moist dough. Next, you need to flatten the dough a little and add the shortening to the center. Then fold the dough towards you, sealing the shortening in the inside. Now we're going to start kneading the dough for 12 minutes, making the same circular motion towards you. Then with the palm of your hand, press it forward and continue repeating this process. At first, the dough will feel soft. As the shortening starts to get incorporated, the dough will feel a little sticky and then it will feel wet. And this is when it will start to stick to the table. So what I do is I knead it for about 4 minutes at a time, scrape the counter and scrape my hands, form the dough into a ball, and repeat the process until the 12 minutes are up. Next, I sprinkle about half a teaspoon of flour on the counter. I place the dough on top of the flour and flatten it so the flour could stick to it. This is going to help us to remove some of the stickiness of the dough, and it will help us work with it. Then I fold the dough towards the center to form a ball. I place the dough on a plate and let it rest for 30 minutes to rise. While the dough rests, what I like to do is clean my counter and prepare the baking sheets where we'll bake the Mallorcas. The baking sheet I use here is a 9x13. Then I use parchment paper to line the baking tray. Did you know that the Mallorcas originated from the Spanish island of Mallorca? How they arrived in Puerto Rico is unclear, and now is part of our culture. Now, after the 30 minutes have passed, we'll cut the dough. But first, I like to roll the dough into a cylinder to try to cut it more evenly. Although, if you have a scale, you could weigh the dough so that each ball is the same size. Then, I cut the dough into 6 pieces that are more or less the same size. But you could always cut the dough into 4 pieces if you want to make bigger Mallorcas. But when you cut them into 6 pieces, they're about 4 to 5 inches wide. Then, what we have to do is form a ball with each piece of dough. Piece of dough. I shape it this way because I find it easier to shape it into a cylindrical shape later. To form the ball, you need to do the same thing you did with the larger ball of dough, which is bring the corners into the center. Then turn the ball around, shape it with your hands or against the table. You'll repeat this process until you have 6 balls. Then place them to the side to form the Mallorcas. The best thing about this recipe is that you could double it so you can make more and freeze the rest. Now everyone has their own particular way of shaping the Mallorcas. The way I'm going to teach you, the Mallorcas will end up almost like a triangle. What we have to do now is stretch each ball to form a cylinder. The easiest way to do this is to flatten each ball a little. Place your hands in the middle and drag the dough towards you. Then pick it up and drag it towards you again until the cylinder measures approximately 12 inches long. But don't worry because they don't have to be the exact same size. Then you'll give it a snail shape. You need to roll it up little by little because this dough is very soft. Now, if you feel that the dough is sticking too much to the table, just sprinkle only a pinch of flour and this will help you. Now, when you get to the end of this snail, what I do is I flatten a little the tip with my hand and then pinch it underneath. This is how the Mallorca looks. Then you just have to repeat the same process with all the balls until you have formed all of your Mallorcas. Now, if you want your Mallorca not to rise as much, what you're going to do is when you start to give it that snail shape, just tuck the first corner under the dough and pinch it. Continue rolling the snail normally. Another thing that will also affect the size and shape of the bread is how you place it in your baking sheet. I normally place each piece about 2 inches apart when baking because I like the way they rise and cook this way. But if you want the Mallorca to have a more square shape instead of like a triangle, just put them side by side. And when they rise, they'll rise in a flatter, squarer shape. When we finish shaping the Mallorca, we're going to place them on the baking sheet. Remember to leave 2 inches apart. Now, you're going to let them rise for about an hour or until they have double in size. What I like to do is turn on the oven light, leave the Mallorcas in there, and with the heat of the light, that helps it poof. And that's how they look. Preheat your oven to 300 degrees. Once hot, bake the Mallorcas for 30 minutes, but halfway through, turn the pan over so they brown evenly. Now, my favorite part, which is adding the sugar. Make sure you cover them well, since sugar is very essential in this recipe. The recipe says you need 3 tablespoons, but I always end up adding more, so feel free to do the same. And look how delicious these Mallorcas look. I guarantee you that these Mallorcas are delicious. I hope you like this recipe as much as my family and I do. You can eat these Mallorcas alone or as a dessert or as a snack. You could eat them plain or you could spread a little bit of Nutella on them or you could make a sandwich with this bread. And as always, thanks for watching.